This is the Movieception Show. I am Fariba, your host today, and we're going to talk more about Miss Marvel. The first episode had came out earlier in the week, and right now, everyone cannot stop talking about it. Everyone has loved it. The reviews have been spectacular, and today we're going to just go more into a deep dive into some of the scenes, a breakdown of some of the scenes, particularly the ones that I felt are very personal to those who have related to a lot of a particular experiences that Kamala has gone through in the show that a lot of people in the Desi community can relate to. As many of you have seen in my reaction video, I've pointed those out. So yeah, I'm gonna actually go into a deep dive of some of those scenes to kind of just educate a lot of you who may not exactly understand some of the references, the terminology and whatnot. And here I'm just here to kind of educate for some of y'all who are a bit confused by some of the scenes. So hopefully this will be a very helpful video. Again, this is an idea from one of the commenters in the reaction video. So thank you very much. I believe it was Muslim Bibliophile. That's why I'm doing this video in the first place. And before I even go and break down some of the scenes, and we'll actually go back into the episode and break some of the scenes down, I just want to say thank you so much. The video has done really well. I believe it is, I think, our most watched video ever in our channel since we've started. As of today, I believe it is at 1.4K viewership. And we've received a lot of people who have subscribed to the channel, and let me just say thank you so much. I've been reading the comments and they've been so encouraging and just so great. Like, I just don't know really what to say, because this is only just the beginning of our channel. We're just only starting, and just to see the amount of support that we have received just from this one video alone, like, it just encourages me more to just do more of these videos, even though it can be very time consuming. And again, like, thank you so much. And because of you guys, it's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing these videos. And now it's just giving me more of this encouragement to do even more. And not just that, but it's even making me more excited for the second episode. So yeah, thank you so much again. But yeah, we're gonna go right down into Miss Marvel, the first episode, and kind of just break down more into some of the scenes that hopefully I can give you a bit more perspective of what it means and what it entails in terms of just one's life as a Desi. So let's get started. Alright, we're gonna stop right here. So instantly you can tell right away who she's referring to as Ummi, which is basically her mother. That's just how you would say it in basically any language, whether it be Urdu, Bengali. I think it's just more of like a Muslim thing more than a language thing, because one thing I can tell you right now for sure is that for someone like me, I would refer to my mom as Ammu or even Mommy. It's kind of interchangeable. As for my dad, I actually refer to him as Baba. I believe in the show she refers to her dad as, I believe it is Abu or Abbi, I can't remember, but it's something like that. But it's just more of like, it's kind of a mix of a cultural and language thing. It can vary across any sort of language or culture. It just depends on more so how you grew up and how your parents kind of referred to you. So like for me, it's always been Baba. For my dad, for my mom, it's always been Ammu or Mommy. It's very interchangeable with my mom, but just again, it's a very minuscule thing. It's not a big difference. But again, it can vary between anybody. It just depends on who they are. So I hope that kind of gives me perspective. Okay, I'm gonna stop right here because this is a really funny scene with her brother right here, because this is actually the first exposure of just kind of the more Islamic practices. So here what we're seeing is basically her brother Amir praying right before eating. One thing I will kind of just I was basically say just a side note is that this is not essentially very common. Like I wouldn't like even in my own family, like my parents are pretty religious and they don't always go and pray every time right before they eat their breakfast and things like that. It's not as common, at least not in my family. In my family household, it could just more likely be just how a person has just been exposed to their own religion and whatnot. Like later on, you'll see in this scene that even their own dad is not as religious as the brother, and he even just kind of like mocks him about it, which is kind of funny. The only time I've actually ever seen, or even myself, like ever, put my two hands up and say any du'as or anything like that, it would be during the month of Ramadan, and that's just because you're actually undergoing a certain special sacred period where you are fasting, and once you are about to break your fast, you want to, make your surahs, make your du'as, be like, I'm about to break my fast, blah, blah, blah. That would be the only time I've actually really would do anything like that, the way that Amr is doing. But in a more regular setting where we're not fasting or anything like that, I've never really seen something like this. But I guess you can say this is kind of reminiscent of, or it kind of parallels to kind of what people would do in terms of like grace, I guess would be the best way to explain it, where people would right before they eat, they would like, pray and be like, thank you, God so much for bringing us food, whatnot. I mean, I don't know about what he's doing, but I guess like it's kind of like emulating a similar situation. But again, this is not as common as you would think, even in my own household where my parents are actually pretty religious Muslims. And again, like, it's pretty funny as well because later on you'll see that in the same scene, his dad actually mocks him for it, so. Um, so one quick thing, basically he said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it just basically means Allah the most gracious, the most wonderful, or something like that. That's just basically what it is. Um, and yeah, like, and it's just referring to Allah himself. So just like a quick side note, basically in Islamic religion, their God is Allah. But let's also emphasize that it's just like different religions, how they perceive their own version of God, but they're all kind of the same, but they're all basically the same in some ways. It's just how they kind of, I guess, make up their own perception of it, their own way of practicing it that just differs, but it's kind of the same. But that's just what he says in terms of subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means the most gracious and wonderful. So basically he's just phrasing God, just describing God, and then saying, okay, make sure you are careful with your words, or just like ignore my father with what he just said, which is basically what is happening right here. So I'm gonna stop here just a little bit right here because of the fact that her dad kind of reminds me of my parents. Just because like I feel like this is just a common thing with any family household. Like you'll get this advice from your parents, be like, just do this, and so do this and that, so that way you can pass this and that, or how to impress a teacher, this and that. And like, again, this is just a really funny scene, and even after that there's a really big scene, so that's why I'm gonna go back for a little bit and rewatch it.
Yes, she does. Just make sure the instructor is and remember to say Bismillah before you start the car. You're gonna need all the help you can get.
Okay, so I gotta stop in this scene because there's one particular part where his brother tells Kamala and be like, right before you start their car, say Bismillah. So this is a very big thing that I have to emphasize because I know in my reaction video I literally like was livid because I'm gonna tell you right now, as somebody who is a Muslim, this is a very very relatable scene. So basically, Bismillah means in the name of God, the most wonderful and merciful, or the most gracious and the most merciful. So basically you're taking in the name of Allah right before you're starting the day, and this is a very common thing that you kind of like for anybody who is a Muslim, a very strict Muslim. I will tell you right now that this is what they will say, Bismillah, just to kind of start off their day and be like, okay, Allah will be in my, shoulders. Hopefully things will go out great because I am, doing this in the name of Allah, whatnot, right? And then And in terms of this, so one of the things I want to say about this particular scene that I found really relatable is that her own brother goes off and says that, oh, Kamala, make sure you say Bismillah before you start driving, right? And this is a very relatable scene because my own mother, again, who is a bit more of a religious Muslim, would always tell me right before I leave the door to do whatever, right? Go to the movie theater or take a test or whatnot. She will tell me, make sure you say Bismillah and then say your whatever it was. And I found this really relatable because I this is every time. And just seeing this scene, it just kind of makes me like, oh my god, this is so common for anybody who is a Muslim that at some point their parents will be like, hey, make sure you say Bismillah because, again, one of the reasons why you want to say Bismillah is just because it's just to also not just, you know, use the name of Allah, you know, whatnot to start off the day, but also kind of just making sure that the devil, like, so for us, we say the shaitan. I know when it comes to other people, it's Satan. We say shaitan, which is basically the devil. It's all the same thing, just different way of saying it. But basically, just making sure that the devil doesn't, you know, essentially cast upon you, you know, to make sure that things go bad or anything like that. So that's kind of just what it is for. And again, it's a very common thing for those who have lived through the more Muslim livelihood. So that's just a little quick thing right there. Again, very hilarious thing. Funny things that even though I would, you know, chastise my mom for telling me things like, oh, make sure you say Bismillah or say your surahs, in the end, like, just because we are a bit more fearful that we do not want our day to go out totally horrible, that we will essentially say it. Like, I would probably be like, okay, Bismillah, just because I feel like, okay, I might actually need to say it because who knows what the hell's going to happen if I don't say it. So, and same thing here. I can totally relate to Kamala in this scene just because, like, she didn't have to do it, but she did it because, of course, like, who knows? She may have needed it to, you know, pass her test. So, uh,
You expected her to signal at every single turn. Yeah. Kamila, give me my keys.
okay, so a lot to digest here. I kind of skipped around a little bit because it is a very long scene. But for one thing, again, I feel like this is just anybody, regardless of culture, religion, whatnot. Like, you'll probably have any sort of parents who are going to try and blame somebody else for their children's, you know, mistakes, their failures or whatnot, right? I mean, I felt it. Although my parents, again, like, sometimes they would know if it is my fault or if it is somebody else's fault. Again, like, I feel like anybody can relate to this in terms of how a parent tries to defend their children and then try to blame it on someone else. This is a very, again, I can relate to the scene in so many ways when it just comes to school wise. Her mom does say kamine keike. Just a little heads up, it is sort of cursing someone out. Kamine means bastard. Which, because Kamine, I'll go more into the whole language. Well, guess what? Okay, I'll go more into the language thing. So they do speak Urdu, because Urdu is the main language in Pakistan. So, but one of the things is that Urdu and Hindi are kind of pretty similar in terms of just the more spoken language of it. So that's why I can understand the Urdu of it because for someone like me who has grown up watching Bollywood, I would say that I kind of learned Hindi, and then because of the fact that the spoken language is similar between Urdu and Hindi, that I can actually understand the Urdu here because for them, I mean, because of the whole language thing, it's kind of like the same. Now, the reason why it is different is because of the more written language. Urdu takes more of the Arabic written way of it to kind of just make it their own, whereas Hindi is very, very different. Like, I don't have to really describe the more Hindi way of it. It's just like, I guess it evolves from Sanskrit in a way. So that's why, even though Hindi and Urdu, the spoken language of it is the same, it's actually two different languages that have different writing. But that's just something I wanted to say. But kamine, again, it's a curse word meaning bastard, and that's something that you'll hear in both Hindi and Urdu. So, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to reiterate. Okay, so this is again in my reaction video. I know I was livid about this one. I just flipped out because as somebody who has a because now I know that there are people who can't really pronounce their names or just don't know how to pronounce it correctly, and I don't fault them, right? Like there's nothing that you can really do, but also it's like it's not always that complicated. I mean, Kamala's a very, easy name. You can see if you read it, it's pretty easy to say. Even my name is pretty easy to say. So, but again, I can relate to Kamala in this because as someone like me who has the name Fariba, which is not a very common name you'll hear in America, right? It's not very common. Kamala is also, until recently, of course, because of, you know, uh, our vice president Kamala Harris, but Kamala here, I mean, I would assume, I would imagine that this is a very common mistake that she would have to, go through because Kamala is not a common name either. I mean, it's not like you hear a lot, like 10 Kamalas or anything like that. I don't think I've met any Kamalas before. And I'm the only Fariba that I've actually ever, encountered, although, yeah, just about. But yeah, no, I can totally relate to her because I've always dealt with the minced pronunciations. I've dealt with Fariba, I've dealt with Farbia, I've dealt with so many of those mispronunciations. And then, even then, when I try to correct them, the same people still mispronounce them. So I feel like even this coach has been corrected before and still refuses to really get it right. I dealt with that so many times, even in my time as a middle schooler. And I feel like even the coach kind of reminds me of my middle school coach. So I can totally relate to her with this. I feel like any brown person can relate to this. I think even some of my brown friends may have used like condensed way of like saying their names, like instead of saying one way they'll probably use like a nickname or something like Ryan or something to just make it easier for their more non-Desi friends. But even then, like I never used that I never took my name for granted to be like, okay, I because my friends can't say my name, therefore I have to use a nickname. I've never ever really done that. I feel like I was given this name for a reason, and I feel like even Kamala understands that. But yeah, this is a common thing that a lot of us have dealt with. I mean, I feel like not even just for us in the Desi community. I feel like anybody who is East Asian, maybe even Hispanic, have dealt with the mispronunciation. So but yeah, no, this is something that I again, every time with my name, particularly very, very commonly mispronounced, although it's technically not that hard to pronounce it. I understand Fariba being a common mispronunciation just because of the spelling of it, but the Farbia one really, it kills me all the time. But yeah.
Still trying to think of that verse.
I want to pause in this part of the video is it's not because of the whole culture religious aspect of it. It's more so just kind of who Kamala Khan is, which is that she is obsessed with the Avengers. She's obsessed with the Marvel universe ish. The fact that she loves Carol Danvers, and just watching that just gives me memories about myself when I was in middle school and high school. Like for me, like just to kind of go back a little bit of my own personal life. For me, the MCU has been a big part of who I am as a person. Like had it not been for MCU, I probably feel like I would have a missing piece of my life. That the one thing that makes me happy. And like growing up, like before I even knew what Marvel even was, right? I've always been focused on studying and trying to get the best grades and trying to impress the teachers. But given what I had to do to enhance, just to like evolve with my own life and make sure that I'm going in a route where I will have a good career, I feel like there was also a part of me where I haven't really discovered who I am or who I was, and something that would make me feel happy. And it wasn't until more so later on when I started to go into middle school that I really started to discover who I was, what my interests were. And one of my interests, of course, was the Avengers. Like going on, like I could tell you right now, just the first Avengers movie when it came out, holy hell, like the the months before the movie had came out, like the amount of obsession, the amount of nonstop talking about the Avengers, like this so is gonna happen, or this is gonna happen, or I'm so excited about this movie coming out. Like I can just going back, like I have so many memories just about my obsession with the MCU and the movies that were coming out each year. And then again, like I feel like that also made me the person who I was. Like it made me distinguishable, that okay, I am this person who loves the MCU, and that's how people remember me as. And just watching the way that she's even interacting with her friend Bruno, same thing I would do. I literally be like, oh my god, like so and so is gonna do this, or Iron Man's gonna do that. Oh my god! And then I would even say bro as well, like right. So again, this is more so just the fact that I can relate, not just relate, but it just brings back memories of who I was as a middle schooler and a high schooler who loves the MCU, and even to this day, I love the MCU. Like it's the one, like even like nowadays, just because I'm no longer like I'm not in college at the moment, I've graduated, that I've actually been more focused on it. So nowadays it's like even now I'm more obsessed about the MCU and what's happening, so on and so forth. Okay, so I just want to stop in this scene because I feel like this is a very important just moment to look at, just in terms of just the Islamic, just a whole Islamic perspective and women in general. So I want to go more into this because I feel like this is a very crucial scene, and I think it's even powerful in a way. So what we have here is Kamala with her two close friends, which are Bruno and Nakia. But now we are just introduced to her other friend, Nakia. And from what we are aware of, she is Turkish. And just from her job, you can tell she is Muslim as well. Now, what I mean by powerful scene, it just shows a really big moment regarding just two Muslim women right here that we have, Kamala and Nakia, right next to each other. But even though they're both Muslim, they couldn't be any more different, right? So I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper into this particular scene right here with these two girls. So, for those who are a bit more aware of the Islamic religion, technically speaking, it is required to wear a hijab as a woman. It's just more so just trying to be. I feel like it's in terms of the respect of it and whatnot, that women have to wear hijab and wearing long dresses, I believe, for modesty or whatnot. Now that's not always the case for all Muslim women. I mean, I'm one example of a Muslim woman. I don't wear hijab. I don't cover my hands from from here to like my arm, right, like my hand right here. I mean, I'm a bit more liberal as to how I like to present myself. But then there's definitely those like Nakia who's a bit more of a stricter Muslim, right? So they will wear the hijab. They will cover their arms. They like to be a bit more modest. But that's the thing though. I think one of the things that I particularly want to highlight about this thing is that it's not a matter of the fact that these are two Muslim women, right? These are two Muslim women who have made their own choices as to how they would like to present themselves, right? And I feel like this is a really big moment because a lot of people assume that just because you are like a woman is a Muslim that they have to automatically have a hijab or keep their arms in full length, right? That's not necessarily the case. Like I feel like in terms of any religion, you're going to have people who are a bit more orthodox, like Nakia, and I don't even think Nakia is orthodox in a way. I mean, she seems like she's a very free spirited, very lively, even like liberal. So, but someone who is more of a practicing person, right? So she is in that side of the aisle, whereas we have Kamala, who's not necessarily as a practicing person or a secular in that case, like someone who's like me who is more secular, right? And I feel like this is something that you'll see in not just the Islamic religion, but you'll see in the Jewish religion. You'll see that in the Christian religion. Basically, any religion, no matter what, right? And that's why I wanted to emphasize this scene because, in terms of being a woman, right? I know that there's always that whole thing with wearing a hijab. I feel like there's a lot of people who frown upon it, be like, why are you wearing a hijab if you're in America? And does that mean that you're very strict as a Muslim? It's not necessarily the case. I mean, even then I feel like it's one's personal choice as to what they want and not want to do. And here, like, I believe that Nakia, I mean, I would assume that Nakia in this particular scene made that choice to wear the hijab. Whereas, of course, Kamala is a bit more secular about it, right? And yeah, and here's the thing is that it's about their own choice, right? Like, they made their own choice. It's not like they were forced upon it. And that's why I want to emphasize this scene in particular. Like, even in my own case, right? While I personally don't wear hijab, it's just my own personal decision. My mom made her, like, my mom is a hijabi, right? And she made that decision that she wanted to wear it, right? She wasn't forced upon by my dad. She wasn't forced upon by anybody. She wasn't forced upon by her mom. She wasn't forced upon by anybody. She made her own choice to wear a hijab, right? And that's her choice. That's something that I've always made it clear to her that if you want to wear a hijab, that's your choice. I don't have to make a statement about it, right? And again, I just love this scene because you can see the contrast between them. They're two Muslim women, yet they couldn't be any more different, right? And but at the same time, it's not like there's anybody forcing it upon them. It's just the fact that it is their own personal choice. So I love the contrast of it. I feel like this was done on purpose, but also to show that the different perspective of it. And again, and especially as a woman, I think this is a really well done scene. So I love it. A Desi like myself, like, we've always been told our parents that we always have to focus on our studies, that we have to focus on grades, we have to have the best grades. And I feel like, again, this isn't just something that Daisies have felt like. This is something that even anyone who is East Asian and Hispanic and Latinx would, probably have dealt with the same experience of, trying to maintain their grades. I just know that personally in my, like, I'll tell you right now, whenever I go to, like, brown parties and I meet up with my friends, one thing you always hear is, like, the pressure from your family to always be at the top, to make sure that you're, doing well in school, that you are getting straight A's, that you are going in a line that will be very effective for your life, that will be very financially stable, like, it'll be financially stable for the rest of your life, right? GREs and everything, all that. So again, this is a really great scene just because there's just so much relatability to it. Again, something that even somebody from the Desi community have always felt, and that's why I want to stop on this particular scene, just to kind of emphasize that, well, yeah, we all have to make sure that we maintain our grades and whatnot.
Okay, I'm actually a genius. So can we stop acting like your mom is Darth Vader?
It's like every single thing I love just seems to hate, and it's like she thinks that just kind of weirdo.
Alright, so I also mentioned this in my reaction video as well, but this is something that I can totally relate to as somebody, again, like me, who has been told that I have to maintain my grades, I have to do well in school, right? Yet the one thing I do as a hobby or as of an interest is focusing on my Marvel or my movies and TV shows or whatnot, right? And I can relate to Kamala in this because anything I love as like an interest, my parents would criticize all the time. Like, even today, my parents still criticize the fact that I'm watching so many movies, I'm watching so many TV shows, but I'm not focusing on med school or whatnot, right? Again, this is something that I totally relate to her in that particular case because of the amount of criticism for our personal hobbies and interests. And again, this is just a perfect scene that just embodies everything that a lot of Desi people have felt because, again, people want, like, we want to do things that we are very interested in, but yet when we express our interest, it kind of gets frowned upon, right? So I totally love this scene right here. It's just a perfect example of the struggles that a lot of people who are Desi have to deal with. And
It's from Nanny. Must be things for the bad. Ahmed, Ahmed, come down here, please. My sister says all this junk.
Well, I'd like to tell you that everything my mother is doing, all that she's always been listening. Doesn't want to die before passing on all that something to us. Amir, have you lost your ears?
So cool. Is this
so there's a lot to digest in this scene in terms of just what's happening in the background and kind of just a couple fashion scenes, and as well as some of the terminology and the Bengals. So I'm gonna go and try to go into this step by step. So one thing she does mention is Nani, which if you can tell from the context of it, that basically is grandma. I call my grandmother Nani, but again, this is perfectly something that I can totally relate to. I believe a lot of Desi people can relate to. I do want to kind of clarify a couple things. Nani is not something that you can say to any grandmothers. It actually pertains to your mother's mom. So my grandmother from my mom's side. So basically, in this case, her mom, which totally makes sense. But if I were to talk about my dad's mom or my other grandmother, it would be Dadi. It would be Dadi. So my Dadi would be my grandmother from my father's side. If we were to refer to our grandfather, at least my mother's side, it'll be Nana, and then for our dad's side would be Dada. So that's a couple of terminologies I wanted to explain because those are because it is very crucial to know how they are related to you. The same thing will apply to aunts and uncles as well, depending on how they're related to you bloodline wise. But because we haven't really seen like any uncles or aunties, I'm not going to go deep into it because it is a bit complicated. But if we do see her uncle or aunt any point in this series, I'll explain it more about it. Couple other things I want to talk about is her mother's fashion. Totally it's just spot on. My mom also dresses in a similar way as Kamala's mom. It will be just some sort of like a scarf around her, and because my mom is Muslim, she's wearing a hijab, so there was always going to be a scarf on her, but she's also wearing, but as for my mom, she's always wearing something where it's like long sleeve and she's always covering herself. But it's like in a particular way, right? So she'll either wear like I believe like a kurti or something, like a kurti or some way, or a long, sleeve shirt or something like that. Like, again, the way that her mom is fashioned, like her fashion senses, again, it totally embodies my own mother. So great job on that, as well as the bangles. Those are very common. I will tell you right now. Like, I think I have seen maybe 5 of those that my mom has. So again, it's just so great to see the details of just the whole cultural aspects of like whether it be Pakistani, Indian, or Bengali. Because one thing I will say is that it's not just a Pakistani lifestyle. This is also somebody you're gonna see who is Indian. You're gonna see somebody who's Bengali or Bangladeshi. So I'm Bangladeshi, right? And I can tell you right now, like, just seeing all this, I can relate to. So again, great way that they kind of showed this particular part. Love it. And yeah, I'm gonna go more into the details of like even the settings in a little bit. So yeah, I love the emphasis of the setting, just showing you kind of just the more like Desi community that they have, that it's not just like them, but it's like a really big community that they have. It kind of gives you a little bit of feel like if it was like a Desi version of like Little Italy or Korean Town or even Chinatown. Similar thing right here. Like in my reaction video, I was referencing Jackson Heights a lot, and the reason why I was saying that because every time I go to New York, we would always go to Jackson Heights because Jackson Heights has like a whole bunch of like of Desi restaurants and Desi shops and whatnot, and it's always in this particular scene. And like you always, if you ever want anything like Desi, right, whether it be food or clothes or anything like that, you would always go to Jackson Heights. That's something that, like, literally I was in New York and I always was hearing about Jackson Heights. Once again, like, you're always in Jackson Heights for something or whatever, right? And she's in New Jersey, so I want to emphasize she's in New Jersey. So she's not in New York, she's in New Jersey. But there's a little bit of a similar sense that, well, there's also another town, another community where they actually have all these stalls, all these shops and plazas where it's like, okay, this is all for anybody who's in the Desi community who needs all this, right? So again, like, at least for me, because I am from Florida, we don't really have that. So it's not something that you'll see everywhere. But in particular places where there is a very, very big Desi community, or whether it be Indian, Pakistani, or Bangladeshi, right? You'll see these types of restaurants like that are like right next to each other, and it's like a whole like version of like Little Italy, like a Desi version of Little Italy or something like that. So, uh, again, a really fun scene, and there's another, and as we get more into it, there's actually more things I'm gonna digest for regarding all of this. So
What did she have to discover about this? Good for her. Maybe she wanted to travel the world and she went for it.
I can just pinpoint like 5 things that a Desi person will instantly just be like that. So I'm gonna go step by step. So one thing, as somebody who is a Desi child and who has a Desi mom, I can tell you right now that anytime we have to go shopping, you will always have to undergo this whole fitting, this very annoying fitting, especially anything that's like big, small, everything. I can totally relate to Kamala in this because when we are ever going into like any sort of salwar shopping for like clothes, particularly more for a wedding, which is funny because it's her brother's wedding, so again, it makes so much sense why she has to go through all this fitting, because it is for a wedding. Particularly for me, if I have to go and shop with my mom, it is probably because of a wedding. So again, perfect. Something that I feel like a lot of Desis can relate to, because you are always having to go to a Desi shop, where a Desi fashion store, where you have to basically try out all these clothes for like a big occasion and whatnot, and you'll probably see problems with it. And it's not like you're choosing them. Here's the thing: it's not like you're choosing them. It's your mom choosing them, and I can tell it's that her mom was the one who put her in this salwar right here. So totally can relate to this. Very common thing that a lot of Desis have dealt with, especially Desi girls. This is a very common thing that we will all experience. Another thing that I want to mention is that this auntie has come out. So one thing I want to mention is that even though we have our own bloodline aunties and uncles, in terms of just our parents' friends in general, we also call them uncles and aunties, even though they're not actually our uncles and aunties by blood. It's a very common thing, but it's also something that you want to do with respect. I don't believe she called her auntie, but I just wanted to kind of make that a side reference. But this auntie comes out and she says assalamu alaikum. That's just basically a Muslim greeting right there. So if I were to go and meet any of my Muslim friends, or meet any uncles and aunties, I'll be like assalamu alaikum. It's just a greeting saying hello and whatnot, right? And that's just, again, a very respectful thing to do. Another thing I want to mention is the way that they just start talking and just gossiping. Holy hell, this is a very, very big thing that any Desi can relate to. Like, the amount of gossiping between mothers is just insane. They will go into details about someone and just go nonstop about it. Here, I think they're talking about someone named Fatma who has broken a like an engagement or something and whatnot. And I'm gonna go into that discussion in a second. But in terms of just like gossiping itself, again, very common. Like, I feel like a lot of Desis just hate it. Like, it's particular for me, whenever I go to a party, you always hear the parents gossiping, and then whenever you're trying to leave, there's going to be another 30 minutes of mom's gossiping. So the gossiping is always nonstop. And it's not just that, right? It's not just parties, right? Like, even just at home, like, my mom would be calling somebody and be like gossiping, or having this argument about someone or something, right? Like, similar setting right here. Like, it's just the whole sense of it. It's just mind-boggling. And I love how the creators particularly want to have this sort of scene right here, where it's like you have a mom and another mom talking about someone, gossiping, which is a very common thing that you'll see in the Desi community, where any, like, all these aunties just cannot stop gossiping. Like, it's just a thing that they have to do. It's like it's just a part of them. So that's a funny thing right there. Another thing she talks about is that they're talking about a young girl. They don't even talk about anybody, right? Like, they're just like, they're like criticizing a young girl who broke off an engagement, right? They don't even talk about the guy, right? Like, they don't even talk about the fact that the guy could have been the problem, right? It's always a girl, right? So again, there is a bit of this double standard, and again, I talk more about the double standard in my reaction video. I'm gonna go more into this in a second, but there is a double standard that comes to being a Desi, where a girl has to, and I feel like, again, this is just not just Desi's, but I feel like this is just a long history of just the culture of it, where women are basically basically positioned to, only be the purpose of going off to be married, have children, and care for them, right? And then only recently we're starting to really evolve as women, where it's like we're finally getting our own choices, where we can make our own choice, what we want to do, what we do not want to do. And here you can see that there's still kind of this gap in between generations, and I love that the title of this episode is Generation Y, because we are seeing kind of this gap between generations, where we have one generation where they are a bit more strict, they're a bit more traditional, whereas somebody like me, who is a bit more liberal, doesn't like to go with the norms of the traditions, right? We want to make up our own minds, and it's just because of how we're a bit more exposed to the more Western ideologies, right? And she even said later on, like, good for her that she's traveling around the world and kind of just finding herself, right? And then the auntie kind of scoffs it off, me like, yeah, and that's why some people like you are not going to get like a ring, right? Like, as if marriage is the only purpose for a woman, right? And I totally hate that. As somebody like me, I totally hate that. Again, this is like, I was very livid in my reaction video, because I can totally relate to this. Like, even today, like, whenever I talk to my aunties, right? Because now I'm in my 20s now, which is technically a marriage age, and I keep getting mentions from my aunties like, hey, so when are you gonna get married, right? And it's kind of just like, yeah, about that. I mean, I try not to go more into details of it, but it's just so annoying to hear something about, like, marriage, right? And just kind of just the way that women are treated, or just not treated, but just the way that they think about the the traditions for women, right? And how we just want to overcome this norm and change it, where it's like, okay, we can have our own choices, make our own choices, and be a bit more liberal and progressive about it. So I totally love this. So again, just because I can, again, it's not just me, but a lot of Desi girls have to deal with this. Like, not just like and random days, like, it's almost like every day for us, and we're trying to do everything we can to just, overcome this struggle, this pressure that we always have to go through, and just be like, okay, we want to have our own voice. So I totally love this part. I can relate to this because I've done this with my Alexa, where I actually gifted an Alexa to my dad, and I basically had to teach him how to use it. And I
don't know that.
There's my Alexa just turned on. That's so funny, because I do have a Alexa in my room. But yeah, I love how they use a Zuzu to kind of do that as well. Again, very hilarious. I love it. Something that I feel like not just any Desi person will relate to, but just anybody who can relate to this, because there is, again, this sort of this change in this direction into more technological lifestyle. And of course, people like me, like in my own generation, have, been exposed to technology almost our whole lives, right? But there's also still the much more older generation that are still trying to get used to it, right? I feel like I can particularly relate to this with my mom more than my dad, because I feel like my dad is a bit more technical able, I guess, like adapt to using more technology, whereas my mom is still kind of a bit more in that phase where she hasn't really kind of gotten used to it yet. But yeah, I'm seeing in particular because there's just so much happening, so I'm gonna go step by step. One thing I want to mention is the fact that they're watching cricket. For anyone who doesn't know, cricket is a very, very popular sport in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. Like it's literally like I believe their national sport or something like that. And there's always this rivalry between Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh in some form, some way. The biggest one is always going to be Pakistan versus India. I don't know if that's what they're watching. I couldn't tell, but cricket is a big, big sport. Like even like it's bigger in that area and in comparison to football. Football being like soccer. Soccer, I believe, is a bit more common all around, which is still popular even in those countries as well. But cricket is like a big, big thing with anybody who is from that area. So one thing I want to mention that. Another thing I want to mention is that the setting of it all. Alright, so here's this one scene right here where you can see like like a painting of some sort, a portrait of some sort of like this Arabic, a whole bunch of like Arabic all around. And one thing I'll say is that this is a very common thing. Like in my own house, we have all this Arabic sort of art pieces like all around our house as well. It's whether it be like a portrait or like I can't even I can't remember all of them, but we have those as well. It's a very common thing you'll see in Muslim households where you're gonna see more of the Islamic displays all around, like decorations and all. And again, it's just more of the fact that because they are Muslim, that they have all this all around the house. So this is a scene where Kamala is basically asking if she can go to Adventure Con, which of course somebody like me will know that that's not going to happen because there. And again, this could just be, and this is like a thing with any parent, like they're always going to be worried about their children going to, unknown places and where they're gonna meet strangers, and then in this case boys. But yeah, in terms of my parents, like I believe in my parents are a bit more lenient. Like I've actually gone to conventions myself. As I mentioned before, I am a big fangirl, and I've actually been grateful enough that my parents have allowed me to go to conventions myself. It did meant that I had to go and be dropped off by them, which we're gonna go and actually see this in a second. Like you have to basically compromise all the time. If you want to go somewhere, you have to compromise with your parents. Be like, okay, if you were gonna go, we're gonna drop you off, for instance, right? But no, my parents have been a bit more lenient in this case. I feel like I've actually have met parents who are a bit more strict and with their own kids about going to certain places or whatnot. Like I've actually seen it myself. Like I once had like one friend who I wanted to go take to a convention with, and I had to convince her mom to go, and I had to get my mom to convince her mom to go to this convention, right? So I've actually seen this more in terms of my other friends instead of just myself. Although I will say that in terms of just like the whole like asking about going to other people's houses, like I will say for one thing in terms of that, I've actually have experience where my parents have said no, where I couldn't go to someone's house or whatnot, right? Like that's one thing I can relate to. But yeah, no, like I feel like any parent can relate to this. This is like I feel like any sort of parent would just understand, right? They don't want their kids to be in danger or whatnot, right? So, but yeah, this is a big part. And then even later on, she talks about the double standards where it's like because her brother is a boy, it wouldn't matter, right? But because she's a girl, all of a sudden they're so strict about it, right? I feel like for me, it's more just so because I'm an older sister that I have to be a bit more obedient, I have to be a bit more, on the nose with my parents, whereas my sister's has been, they've been a bit more lenient with my own sister about going to places, right? So that's just something that I wanted to mention, that like it can just vary in terms of just who you are, how you were born and whatnot, right? Events, a very heartbreaking scene. Again, well done in terms of just how they just did all this. So for one thing, as I mentioned before earlier, compromise. You always have to compromise. This is something that you always have to deal with, right? I've dealt with my own compromises with going to conventions with my parents, and it's kind of the same thing here. Like she even mentioned how her dad would be the one to drop her off. Again, this is a very common thing. Terminologies: chote means small, bada means big, that's kind of like context clues right there. The fact that he's wearing a salwar kameez, it's just a hilarious thing, and it's like in a Hulk form too, hilarious. But yeah, no, a very heartbreaking scene right there, and again, just so much to digest in terms of this scene, but yeah.
I'm lost. What does it have to do with letting mom?
It's not kind of weird.
No, it's not.
It's child. I know that. And let's be honest, it's not really the brown girls from Jersey City who save the world.
So this was a very powerful moment that I feel like just this whole conversation right here, oh, is a very powerful moment because it just talks about everything from just the criticism that you would feel as someone who does like a particular thing as a girl, right? A Desi girl, to like the fact that your parents do not approve of the things that you do, right? And then not just that, but the fact that she emphasizes the bit where it's like you don't necessarily see a brown girl be a superhero, right? And here she is, and with her own series where she basically is, you know, proving that wrong. And I think one of the things I want to mention in terms of just Kamala Khan herself, right? In terms of just the image of just a brown girl as a lead, right? Never have I ever, at least in my particular case, have I seen a brown girl, right, as a lead of any movie or whatnot. At least when I was growing up. So from the day that I, started the school up until like maybe my high school years, right? I never ever saw a young brown girl as a lead, let alone a superhero, right? It wouldn't be until maybe recently in the last 3 years I started to really see this diversity where we are seeing more brown girls as leads. Like never have I ever. And then recently with the second season of Bridgerton, and those are the two that I can recall right now. And now here we have Miss Marvel, another brown girl as a lead in her own show. And again, it's just this testament to the fact that we're starting to see more representation of brown girls being seen as more than just side characters, ones who have accents, right? Like anytime you'll see anybody who looks like us, it's not going to be as a lead, right? It's going to be a supporting character, very likely going to have an accent of some sort, right? Again, the only probably some of the more exceptions in terms of the accent part would be like Kelly Kapoor, right? But again, she was still a side character. We never really saw a lead brown girl until more recently. So again, this is a testament of just a big moment that we're seeing more brown girl representation in the media, whether it be the movie, a TV series, or whatnot. And even then, like the ones I've actually mentioned or have been TV series. I haven't really seen a movie where we have a brown lead as of yet. Although hopefully that will probably change with the Marvels coming out soon. But again, like there's still a lot more ways to go, but this is a very good start to really just showing more representation for not just brown girls, but just the fact that they are the lead characters. Another thing I do want to mention is that again, superheroes, and in terms of the fact that Kamala is a Muslim superhero is a big thing, right? Because I feel like it's impossible not to mention 9/11, right? 9/11 has basically changed everything, not just for Americans, right? It has changed a lot of people who are Muslim. Like the way that Muslims have had to struggle, to the fact that because of what happened in 9/11, they have to deal with this whole guilt that because they're Muslim, not guilt, but okay, let me emphasize that. So one of the things I feel like it's impossible not to mention is 9/11, because it hasn't just affected just Americans in general, right? But it has also affected many people in the Muslim community. And what I mean by that is that there's this thing where Muslims are always villainized. That if you were to mention Muslims, right, in some ways they're going to be villains. And in particular in the media, right, whether it be a movie or a TV show, if you were ever to see any Muslim characters, it's very unlikely that you would ever see them as like a protagonist, let alone like a supporting character who's in the good side. They'll probably be in the a bad character. It wouldn't be until more recently where we're starting to see more of just this diversity where Muslims can also be good people, but that's just more recently, right? And now the fact that we are talking about a Muslim superhero is a huge, huge thing, because now we're finally going to a point of something where it's just like, now we can finally show that Muslims are not villains, but they can also be superheroes who can do something for the world that isn't, a reflection of what happened on 9/11. That Muslims can be more than just that, right? Like, we can't just define a group of people because of what somebody or someone has done for politics, for clout, whatnot, right? And this is something that I feel like is a really, really important thing in terms of the series, because it's kind of, you know, changing the whole perspective of what it is like, it is like to be a Muslim, what it is like seeing a Muslim on the media, such as Kamala Khan. And a very, very big moment that like, it's a very strong quote that she mentions, that like, you don't see just a brown girl who's a superhero, right? It's a brown Muslim girl who is a superhero, and yet here we have a brown Muslim superhero in this show who can show that she has a heroic trait, essentially. So this is a big, big moment to really just mention, because there is kind of that history that Muslims have dealt with, where they have been criticized. They have dealt with a lot of really horrible things, like the insults, the Islamophobia, right? Like, even then, like, Islamophobia is still a big, big thing, and yet here we have a Muslim character who's showing that, okay, whatever you thought about Muslims is not always true. I mean, you can't just, again, define a whole group of people just because of what fundamentalists or extremists have done. And one thing I want to mention is that it's not just like Muslims have bad and good people, right? Every religion has bad and good people regardless. And this is like a big, big testament to that. It's like, well, because you've seen so many bad Muslims, whether it be in movies or TV shows or in the history of it, let's also show the fact that, well, Muslims can also be good. Like Kamala Khan, like, she's just an ordinary teenage girl who's just, going through the same teenage struggles as any other teenager, right? Like, what, just because of the fact that she's Muslim, like, that shouldn't, change who she is. I mean, she's just like any other person. Same thing like me. Like, even for someone like me who has been Muslim, like, just because I'm Muslim doesn't mean that I'm not like any other person. And I've been a bit more fortunate that I haven't really experienced any of that Islamophobia. But I know that it is a very common thing, and it's very prevalent right now in our time today, not prevalent, but relevant in our time today than ever before. So again, a very big testament of just this whole series in general, right? A lot of ways, because again, I feel like it's just a lot of the fact that she is a brown girl, right? Like, you wouldn't necessarily think that a brown girl would be the right fit for winning a costume contest that is about Carol Danvers, aka Captain Marvel, right? I feel like I've dealt with this before. It's like, I want to dress up as a particular character because of the fact that I am a brown girl, it's not like I'm the actual image of what I'm the image of that sort of person, right? So I totally, totally can understand with what Kamala's feeling. Like, she's feeling this, weight over her that, like, well, the fact that she's a brown girl, like, she's probably not going to get any cheers or whatnot, or, people will just be like, oh, well, she's a brown girl, that doesn't really matter, So something that I can also relate to is just that there's just kind of this, like, not just criticism, but just kind of like, you're not the image of this sort of person, therefore you won't get this amount of support by other people, right? Again, just something that I can totally relate to. Is just, again, a similar thing. But yeah, that's sort of it in terms of just some of the Desi moments, scenes, or whatnot that I was able to catch. Hopefully that this is very educational and gives you a different perspective of what it's like to be someone who's Desi like me, or just like anybody who has been in the community as well. I'll try to do more of these types of breakdown scenes where I can go more in depth about how this scene in particular is a very crucial moment in terms of just like any Desi experiences. but not just that, but if I feel like I can, I'll try to keep this more in terms of the reaction video itself. But again, like in terms of just reaction videos, like considering that how many times I had to stop, I will tell you right now that I'll do my best to explain it. But in terms of reaction videos, I feel like if I keep stopping, it's just going to make like a reaction video itself a bit more discombobulated and distracting with all those sorts of stopping a scene and trying to explain it, and then who knows what's going to happen in the next scene, because it'll be a first time reaction for that case. So I'll try to stick to doing a reaction video, just kind of just giving my own reaction in terms of the scene. I'll try to explain it more in terms of like what's going on if I quickly can, but I'll try to also do a more in-depth analysis of just like a breakdown of the scenes and just explain what it's like in terms of how this thing can resonate to a lot of people who are brown. And in particular, like, I feel like this is very important because it kind of just shows our perspective for once, and it's just so refreshing to have that sort of perspective, especially from Kamala Khan. So again, I'm totally excited to see what else is gonna happen. I know that the second episode is going to emphasize more of Kamala's more Islamic roots. So I feel like that will be another video where I feel like I do need to do a breakdown video and kind of just go more in depth of what it's like, just to explain more of it without having to kind of just make it distracting in the actual reaction video. But yeah, I'm super excited to see what else happens in Miss Marvel. But yeah, this is just that's all I have to really say. I hope that this was a very educational video. It gave you a bit of perspective, and hopefully you are enjoying the show. I know I am. I know a lot of people are. But yeah, and once again, thank you so much for the support. Keep commenting, subscribing again, and let me know like if there's anything else I may have missed. So, but yeah, that's all I have to say. So I'm gonna sign off right here. All right, bye.